I was fortunate to have known Dr. Davis from when I first came to Miami in 1949 to be married. His wife was my wife's aunt, and I have known him from the time I met him in 1949 to his death, I think, in about 1970. I think it's one of the most important factors in the development of the black community in Dade County and Miami between the 1930s, when he first opened his office, to the 1960s before he died. As I look back and try to remember with my 98-year-old memory, the number of firsts which he accomplished is truly astounding.
Today, at 1126 Northwest 2nd Avenue in Overtown, stands a white apartment building. But back in the heyday of Overtown, another white building stood on this very spot. It was called the Little White House, the home of Miami dentist Ira P. Davis. It was at this home that Davis met with other like-minded individuals to effect change and make life better for blacks in Miami. The work done at the Little White House made Miami a major forerunner in the civil rights movement in the South. Dr. Ira P. Davis was born in Jacksonville in 1896. He lived in northern Florida, where he attended Florida A&M College. It was during this time that he was drafted into the Army and served in the Medical Corps in France during World War I. He served 11 months in the Army and later entered Howard University School of Dentistry, where he graduated in 1929. In 1936, he moved to Miami, where he set up his dental office in Overtown at 1036 Northwest 2nd Avenue. It is there that he met his future wife, Louise Stirrup, the daughter of Miami pioneer E.W.F. Stirrup.
My father and mother and my grandmother lived in Overtown, and he attended St. Agnes Church. He and Father Comer were very close. And he was senior warden for many years, member of the vestry, but he and Father Comer and Judge Thomas, they were like three individuals that worked constantly together. My father never really talked much about racism. He always was more like, instead of talking about stuff, he was more about action and how to maneuver.
The time that Davis spent in the Army allowed him to qualify as a veteran in the armed forces. In January 1937, he helped to establish the John Griffin Post for colored veterans of the World Wars. This later became a colored unit of the American Legions. At this time, he was appointed as the state's first black district commander. It was in this organization that Dr. Davis fought for housing rights for black veterans and other black citizens. It was also this organization that became the catalyst that he would use to fight for other rights for black people in Miami.
And their goal was first to get adequate housing for the veterans, to make sure that the veterans had access to all the services that the white veterans had access to, and to build their morale. That was their goal, and that's what they started working on. And within a short period of time, they spread it to all of the blacks in Miami. So that's where the beginning starts with that.
Dr. Davis and a coalition of others, such as Annie Coleman, founder of the Friendship Garden and Civic Association, Lawson E. Thomas, an attorney who later became the first black judge in the South after Reconstruction, Reverend Culmer of St. Agnes Episcopal Church, and Captain James E. Scott were some of the individuals that would meet at the Little White House to improve the lives of the people in the community. In 1937, Davis and other like-minded individuals were invited to a meeting at Reverend Culmer's St. Agnes Church. Annie Coleman of the Friendship Garden and Civic Club wanted to include the men into a discussion of how they would approach the city leaders for the need to have black police officers policing their community. It took 7 years of planning and strategizing before this plan would come to fruition. Davis and others' continued organization led to the establishment of the Greater Miami Negro Service Council in 1941. This was an interracial organization aimed at bringing the Urban League to study the living conditions of blacks in Miami.
The first 3 years, the people didn't know the Urban League was here. They operated under the Negro Service Council's name because whites viewed it as being a subversive organization.
With the Urban League's secret involvement, Davis and his team asked the city leadership for a Negro police force once again.
Now, they had been fighting to get the black policemen for years, okay? And it wasn't until 1944 that again they got traction. A lot of time it's timing. And the timing was the war had been going on, there was a shortage of manpower, and so this was a good time to ask again. So when they asked again, and they ended up looking at the fact that there were only, the colored population had grown. Can you believe there were 2 cops for all of the black areas? Liberty City, Coconut Grove, and the Central District, as they called it, Overtown. 2 cops that were white. And at the time, the only requirement to become a policeman is to have a strong back. So a lot of these, Southern whites might have come and taken the position. So it was a lot of police brutality. That was one of their reasons that they presented. But I don't think that's what made the difference with the commissioner or the commission. What made the difference is that they said, look, the criminal rate, all of that had just escalated. And because of that, it was going to have a negative effect on tourism. Now we're talking about money in the pocket, because Miami prides itself on tourism. That, I think, was the part that really got them the traction.
And on September 1st, 1944, the first 5 police officers were installed in a ceremony in front of Dr. Davis' office. This is where they would also report for roll call each day. 20 days later, more officers were added, and by the end of the year, the colored community had 15 officers. There would be more advancement in criminal justice in the later years, but there were other issues that Davis and his colleagues would undertake. blacks have not had a place to swim since D.A. Dorsey was forced to sell his island property to Carl Fisher some 30 years before. A plan was made to have a wade-in at Baker's Hallover Beach.
In terms of the wade-in, when you look at the time period, it took place in 1945 when they were training some of the black servicemen to go abroad. They trained them at Virginia Key. It was called something else then. When they came back, they weren't allowed to go there. And there was no black beach. And when the word got out that they were getting ready to renovate it and to make it a white beach, then they said, oh, no, it's time. We need to go after this.
On May 9th, 1945, a group of blacks that included Father Theodore Gibson of Coconut Grove, Maydell Jackson Brannon, and Mary Sweeting were chosen to wade in the water. Maydell Brannon was the secretary of the NAACP. She was charged with holding the money for the arrest that the group was anticipating. But few were willing to risk their positions with their white employers. This was not a problem, however, for Brannon. Her husband was a business owner who did not have to rely on a white person for his livelihood.
The day that it happened, they actually called and told the police they were there. It wasn't that they got found out that they were there. That was the plan.
The actions of the wade-in prompted a discussion between black city leadership and the Miami-Dade County Commissions. And on August 8, 1945, the Virginia Key Beach was opened to blacks. More than 100 people participated in the event. Dr. Ira P. Davis was sought out by many to aid them in their causes. He frequently met with not only local leaders, but national leaders as well. In 1946, Davis met with President Harry Truman to discuss housing for veterans. Also around the same time, the city of Miami formed an interracial committee to study the slum conditions of Miami's black areas.
They were to study the slum conditions in the black areas, the colored areas, Overtown, Coconut Grove, and Liberty City. And they were to make a report to the city commission about what was going to be done. Now, Overtown was far worse than anyone. It's like you could jump out of one person's back porch into another's house.
Davis made sure that Overtown was studied first due to the dismal conditions of the area. As a result of the study, minimal living standards were proposed for all dwellings in the city of Miami. Requirements included running water in all households, flushable toilets, and at least one sink in all dwellings. Davis also spearheaded the campaign to integrate the Orange Bowl.
They had asked for admission before, that we get some seats in it. They told us it wasn't possible because they didn't have bathrooms for blacks. So when they talked about renovating and enlarging the stadium, so when they first got wind of that, and a black delegation considering of Daddy and Father Comer and others, went to them again and said, okay, you're getting ready to enlarge. You said before you didn't have bathroom facilities. We're trying to make sure now, while you're still planning, that you put bathroom facilities in there for blacks. The blacks had really started their own. They had the Yuletime Fiesta Committee, and it was called the Fiesta Coconut Grove Bowl Game. And it was right around the time of the Orange Bowl. So the Orange Bowl parade was the night before. So some of the businesses from that parade donated the floats to be used the next day for the fiesta. But before they left, he turned back and said, sort of like, and by the way, is it possible that we could get access to the Orange Bowl for one game a year?
On December 19th, 1946, it was announced that the Orange Bowl would provide access to blacks. The Orange Blossom Classic was brought to Miami, and the game was played in the Orange Bowl.
As the police officers had done so well, on January the 5th, 1949, my father chaired a meeting of religious leaders at Far Chapel. And at this meeting, a resolution was drawn up asking or requesting that the black community be provided with a precinct, a jail, a courthouse, and a black judge.
The city commission agreed to all except the black judge. Davis and his group continued to argue for a black judge behind the scenes.
So finally they agreed to the black judge. Now all along now, they weren't necessarily saying who it should be, but they knew who it should be. And then they went back and said, you gotta have the right person.
My husband, L.E. Thomas, he pioneered the way for black lawyers here. Came to Miami in 1935 to practice law. And at that time, the only black lawyer here was an old Spanish-American War veteran, R.E.S. Toomey, who hired a white lawyer to handle his cases. And the Bar Association president told Lawson that he should do the same. And he said, no, if I do that, then it's no need of clients coming to me. They can go directly. So that he was respected by bench and bar. And in 1950, he was appointed that judgeship.
On April 19th, 1950, Lawson E. Thomas was selected by the Miami Commission as the first black judge in the South since Reconstruction. Thomas and two officers of the Negro Police Force cut the ribbons to the new police precinct and courthouse on May 22, 1950. Davis also worked to desegregate the golf courses. In 1955, Davis was instrumental in bringing the Ray Mitchell North-South Golf Tournament to Miami. The 4-day tournament brought numerous celebrities such as tennis superstar Althea Gibson and others. Miami saw an infusion of cash into the city as a result.
And so they had all this entertainment, and thousands of people were coming to Miami each year. So after a point, Miami asked to be a co-sponsor. And as it got toward in the last few years of it, it became integrated.
When Christian Hospital was moved from Overtown to Brownsville in 1959, Davis was central to the move.
So Father Comer, Judge Thomas, and my father always believed that a lot of times you had to work behind the scenes. You had to ask for less than what you wanted, because they weren't going to give you everything to begin with, to make it palatable, and then you keep going back getting more, and they will constantly be working back behind the scenes and with whites as well as blacks. But sometimes they were criticized because they thought that, well, you all aren't being militant enough or whatever. But look at all what they accomplished in a time when we had nothing. And so much so that Miami became the example for the South. What happened in Miami, then all of a sudden, Orlando, Tampa, Fort Lauderdale, other southern cities, it was like, now this is your marching orders of what you're to do now.
Ira P. Davis' educational, professional, and military experience enabled him to contribute and impact the Black community in significant and multiple areas. Davis died on May 22, 1970. He was 74 years old.